Section 1. Hey guys. Tonight we're heading somewhere no sleepy brain should logically wander, but here we are. The torches flicker against tall marble columns, the air smells faintly of sweat and iron, and you're standing in the center of the Colosseum, blinking up at 50,000 silent spectators. They're not here for a concert. They're here for you. To your left, a trap door groans open, and something moves below. Fast. Too fast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. End of Tuno. You don't exactly remember what crime you committed, but apparently, it was bad enough to earn you a starring role in the Roman Empire's favorite live performance, Damnatio ad Bestias, Condemnation to the Beasts. The sand beneath your feet is hot from the sun. You fidget with the rope binding your hands, wondering if they greased the lions today, or if you're just imagining the scent of raw meat clinging to your tunic. The Emperor sits under a purple awning, idly sipping something cool and smug. He doesn't look at you. Everyone else does. This wasn't just capital punishment. It was entertainment. A blend of death penalty and circus act, perfected by the Romans and scheduled between chariot races and theatrical skits. One unlucky criminal, one hungry animaler, 5. And before you get smug and think it was always a lion, think again. Sometimes it was bears. Sometimes wild dogs. Occasionally, rather insultingly, ostriches. You imagine being pecked to death by an angry, oversized bird while the crowd laughs. Now that's embarrassing. You glance back at the holding gate, hoping for a malfunction. No such luck. The Romans didn't just toss anyone into the arena. Some were criminals, sure murderers, traitors, escaped slaves. But sometimes it was just political inconvenience, dressed up as justice. Historians still argue whether all of these were formal sentences or if some were just handy cover stories for state-sanctioned executions. One senator too loud? Oops. He's suddenly an enemy of the people and ends up as lion chow. What makes this worse is the little details, like the fact that sometimes you weren't given weapons. That's right, you're in a sandy pit with a starving panther, and your grand defense strategy is hope. Or, if you're lucky, a stick. Now and then, the Romans added a twisted flair. Picture this. They dress you up as the mythological character, Orpheus, hand you a lyre, and then release a bear. The crowd cackles. Symbolism. Oh, hand if you're convicted as a Christian during the early centuries. Double trouble. The Romans loved irony. You might be tied to a stake, smeared in pitch, and set on fire to light a night show. That's if you weren't mauled during lunchtime. No, really. Lunchtime executions were called meridiani, and yes, some Romans packed bread and olives for the occasion. You stare into the sun, trying to imagine a way out. Your brain does the math. Beast speed versus your terrified shuffle. Odds aren't good. But part of you is still hopeful. Maybe they brought in a sickly old leopard today. Maybe he's not hungry. Maybe you'll trip and knock yourself out before anything sharp and toothy arrives. But then the gate rattles again. This time it opens wider, and what steps out is not what you expected. It's a boar. Huge, angry, tusks like daggers. You almost want to laugh. Death by pork. The creature snorts and digs at the dirt, and somewhere in the stands, a flute starts playing cheerful music. You think back to the stories you heard growing up, how noble Romans were, how civilized, how they built aqueducts and roads and libraries. But this feels like something scraped off the bottom of human decency. And yet, here it is, normal, celebrated. The boar charges. Your reflexes scream and you jump aside, scraping your knees, rolling to dodge. It brushes past. The crowd gasps. then roars with laughter. You're putting on a great show. Some punishments are meant to be clean, efficient. Not this one. This is a spectacle. A slow, flailing, public unraveling of a human being in front of 50,000 sandwich-munching strangers. And as you run awkwardly, pathetically you spot another door opening. No, not a second animal. Something else. A man in armor. A Retiariusa net-wielding gladiator. He's not here to save you. Sometimes, when the animals got bored, the Romans spiced it up. They'd throw in a trained killer just to keep the energy up. Mixed genre punishment, if you will. You trip again, this time near a patch of blood-soaked sand. Your mind flashes through regret, confusion, panic. You wonder if anyone's even listening to you scream. Above it all, the Emperor finally leans forward. Curious now. Boredom cured. And somewhere, maybe, a historian 2,000 years later will try to decide if this punishment was strictly legal or more a political stunt. You know the answer doesn't really matter anymore. All you can do is run. You can barely breathe through the heat trapped inside the leather sack. The smell hits you first-rank animal sweat, damp straw, something that might be fish guts. It's hard to tell. All of it is soaked into the hide you're sealed in, and every time you move, it squishes around you. The sack wriggles. You're not alone. They've stitched it shut from the outside, nice and tight. You can feel stitches press against your forehead. Something brushes your leg. Something alive. Welcome to Puena Culea, uniquely Roman punishment for parricide, the crime of killing your own father, mother, or close relative. You didn't do it, of course. Or maybe you did. Rome didn't always wait for a signed confession. Still, this feels personal. Traditionally, the Puena Culiae involved being sewn into a large leather sack with a few companions, a dog, a monkey, a rooster, and a snake. Why those animals? Historians still argue about the symbolism. The snake makes a certain grim sense: death, betrayal, sin. But the monkey? The rooster? One theory suggests it was to represent chaos, or perhaps mockery nature turning on itself, just as you supposedly did. Another theory says the animals were merely chosen for being inconveniently loud, scratchy, bitey, or difficult to handle in close quarters. In this moment, you're inclined to believe the second theory. Something pecks your thigh. Oh, and that's not the end of it. Once the sack is fully sealed, you're tossed into a river. You sink fast. No sunlight, no air, and several panicked animals clawing their way toward the ceiling, which, unfortunately, is also your face. The Tiber isn't known for its mercy. The logic, such as it was, had to do with purification. Romans believed parricide was so foul it disrupted the cosmic order. Killing your own father? That wasn't just a crime I'd broke nature. The punishment had to remove you from land, air, and fire entirely. So they gave you to water. You try not to panic as the dog whines and shuffles against your ribs. Is that a feather? Number? Please no. The sack shifts again. Some sources say the practice was rare. Others suggest it happened more often than records admit, though exact numbers are impossible to confirm. What's more interesting is the ritualistic care they took in preparing this death sentence. In some versions, you were beaten first. In others, paraded in chains before the crowd. One account even includes a bit of theater, where the condemned wears a black hood and is denied the right to speak. You'd scream now, but no one would hear it. There's something poetic about being buried alive by animals that don't want to be here either. You remember hearing that Emperor Hadrian reintroduced the punishment after it fell out of favor for a while. He was big on symbolism, clean lines, crisp justice. Or maybe he just liked things that made an impression. It's dark in the sack, stifling. You shift slightly and feel the monkey's tail flick your arm. It screeches. The snake is quiet. Too quiet. You wonder if it's already found a place to coil. Maybe it's in the rooster. Maybe it's under your spine. Either way, the panic is rising fast, and you're very aware that you're breathing everyone else's air in here. It's humid with terror. You're not even sure where they plan to drop you. The Tiber? Maybe. Some less poetic version of this had criminals dunked into a harbor or tossed off a bridge. Wherever it is, you won't be coming up. The sack is heavy. And these animals? They're not buoyant friends. They're flailing weights, and they're just as scared as you are. You try to remember the charges. Was it actually parricide? Or just something like it? One philosopher wrote that the Romans sometimes bent the definition to include disloyalty to the emperor as a father of the nation. It's a stretch, but so were many things in imperial law. Either way, your fate's been stitched shut. One story possibly apocryphal, but who knows tells of a condemned man whose rooster escaped the sack mid-ceremony and perched on a senator's shoulder. The crowd laughed. The man didn't. They caught the bird and stuffed it back in, for justice. Historians debate whether poena culae was more theatrical than practical. Some point to the animal logistics. Where are you even supposed to get a monkey in ancient Rome on short notice? Others argue that the stories gained mythic exaggeration over time. Maybe not every sack had the full menagerie. Maybe sometimes it was just the snake, or just the drowning. But whether it was every time or just sometimes, the psychological horror was real. You sit, sweating, pressed between four angry, twitchy creatures that do not want to go down with you, and yet, that's exactly what's going to happen. The cart jolts forward. They're wheeling you toward the river. You try to brace yourself, but there's nowhere to move. You're packed in like regret. You imagine what the sky looks like right now if the sun is bright. If the crowd is watching, if your sack will float just long enough for someone to see it bob on the surface like a grotesque balloon, before it sinks with a slurp. You were born in Rome, raised under her laws, trained in her streets. But now, you're being erased from her elements-denied land, fire, air, just water, and fear, and feathers. You shuffle down the cobbled road of the Forum, tunic soaked with sweat, shame, and a little leftover wine someone threw at you 3 alleys ago. Not that you're counting, your feet ache. The placard around your neck scratches your chest, the rope digs into your wrists, and the toga they gave you is humiliatingly short and patch-barely covering anything and dyed an aggressively ugly mustard yellow. It is, without question, the least flattering outfit you've ever worn. Welcome to one of Rome's favorite civic traditions, the public shame parade. No beasts, no blades, just a long, slow walk through crowded streets while every neighbor you've ever had jeers at you from their fruit stalls. Your crime? Petty theft. Or maybe sleeping with the wrong senator's wife. Honestly, the sign around your neck says, adulterer, in red paint. But you suspect that's more of a general insult than a legal classification. This isn't execution, it's humiliation. And the Romans were masters of humiliation. They called it infamia, a formal loss of status. If you were a citizen, this paraded disgrace could wreck your standing permanently. If you were a slave, it was your boss's way of saying, I'm not killing you, but I could have. You glance at a vendor who snorts and spits a grape pit at your ankle. A kid throws a fig. Great aim. Now and then, someone shouts a chant that rhymes. It's catchy. You try not to remember it. 2 latates already in your head. Like a TikTok soundbite you'll never forget. The Romans weren't subtle about these punishments. They believed in making the consequences visible. Wear your crime. Show your shame. Live with it. They'd use wooden boards around your neck or a crown of thorns if they were feeling theatrical. And if they really wanted to make a point, they'd shave your head in jagged clumps mid-march. Nothing says, life lesson, like bad bangs. You pass a marble statue of Jupiter, and can't help wondering if he's judging you too. Probably. The pigeons certainly are. Some of the onlookers laugh, but others look at you with something worse boredom. You're just the 11 a.m. show. Some might not even remember your face by sundown. There's something uniquely cruel about being made into background noise. And still, you walk. Historians debate whether these parades were technically legal sentences or just customary penalties, part public scolding, part theatrical event. In some cases, they accompanied actual trials. In others, they were used to cleanse the city's moral order. You didn't just offend a person, you offended the dignitas of Rome itself. You stumble slightly, and a soldier prods you back into line with the blunt end of a spear. No blood, just bruised dignity. And of course, the worst part is the placard. The titulus, as they called it. Big block letters, smeared across rough wood, announcing your crime to everyone who doesn't already know. It bounces against your chest with every step. Your arms are sore from holding it up. Sometimes they got creative. One unlucky man had his charges sung by a chorus of local children. Another was paraded on a donkey backward. The Romans loved an ironic twist. You hear someone behind you chuckle and realize your toga's riding up. Again, the breeze isn't helping. You think back to how this started. A whisper. A mistake. A favor called in by someone more powerful than you. It's strange how fast a personal vendetta can become public humiliation when the right magistrate is involved. You pass a group of magistrates now. They watch you like you're a stage play. You wonder if any of them were involved in your sentencing or if they're just here for lunch entertainment. At the end of the route, you're herded up the steps of a small platform. This is the final scene. A man in fine robes reads your crime aloud, mispronouncing your name, because of course he does. Then the crowd gets to throw things, rotten vegetables, sharp words, a few coins if they're feeling generous. One hits you square in the temple. It's a peach pit. Who even eats peaches in May? Eventually, someone declares you purged of civic offense. That's it. No applause, no redemption arc, just a grunt and a wave of the hand. The soldier unhooks your rope, and you're allowed to limp away, still smeared with fig pulp, still clutching your dignity like it's been through the wash too many times. You duck into an alley and peel the sign from your chest. It leaves splinters in your skin. It's over. Except it's not, because tomorrow, people will still recognize you. They'll remember your walk, your name, your patchy mustard toga. Your dignity has been wrung out and hung to dry in public. And some punishments don't end when the crowd goes home. The air smells like olive oil, roses, and something off. Sweet at first, then smoky, then unmistakably wrong. You're standing in the gardens of Nero's Golden House, a sprawling pleasure palace draped in vines and dotted with fountains. It's nighttime, but the garden is glowing, lit not by lanterns or torches, but by human beings. That's not a metaphor. You squint, struggling to believe your eyes, and no, they're not playing tricks on you. Bound to tall posts are figures smeared in tar, their shapes flickering like grotesque candles. Flames dance across their bodies. A breeze moves through the hedges, carrying the scent of burning hair and pine resin. This, apparently, is a party. So far, Roman punishment has felt theatrical, even absurd. But here in Nero's garden, you've stumbled into something far more terrifying. Execution as ambiance. The emperor himself reclines on a platform nearby, sipping wine and commenting on the arrangement like he's judging a flower show. That one burns unevenly, he muses, pointing. You try not to gag. The people tied to these stakes? Christians, or at least accused Christians. In the wake of the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, Nero needed a scapegoat. He blamed this small, mysterious religious sect already viewed with suspicion, and suddenly, Christian became a criminal label you didn't want anywhere near you. Historians still argue whether Nero genuinely believed the Christians started the fire or if he simply found them politically convenient to blame. What's clear is that his punishments were more about optics than justice. Tonight, the optics are theatrical. You're offered wine. You decline. Good choice. A musician plucks a lyre nearby, playing something cheery as the flames crackle louder. Laughter drifts through the crowd. Nobles, artists, hangers-on-none, of whom seem particularly disturbed by the blazing figures swaying like tormented willows. You try not to look, but your eyes are drawn to one man's expression. His mouth is open, frozen mid-scream, teeth bared in agony or defiance. You can't tell which. His skin is darkened and blistered, yet somehow still whole in some places. Maybe the tar slowed the fire. You remind yourself not to breathe through your nose. There's a story that Nero once dressed victims in wax tunics and called them living torches. Some scholars think this was embellish an ancient version of sensational journalism. Others believe it completely. And frankly, now that you're here, you lean toward absolutely real. You can feel the heat on your face. It wasn't just the fire. There were other punishments: crucifixion, animal maulings, and bizarre stage plays where prisoners were forced to act out biblical scenes that ended, of course, in death. The garden, however, was Nero's own twisted invention. A private amusement park of horror. What unsettles you most isn't the cruelty, it's the quiet casualness. The party continues, as if the flames are simply part of the decor. People chat, they flirt. They nibble on roasted grapes and honey-dipped dormice. You overhear someone say, "What a clever use of citron oil." Another replies, "They burn longer when you coat the hair first." You try not to shiver. The man next to you, dressed in an embroidered tunic, smiles like you've just shared a joke. "It's all very tasteful this season," he says. You nod faintly, heart-pounding. And that's the horror of it, the normalization, the performance of punishment so refined that no one even flinches. Historians still debate how many Christians were executed this way, and whether every story of human torches was literal. But most agree that Nero used death as performance art. He was Rome's first true punishment influencer, crafting scenes, not just to destroy lives, but to sculpt public opinion, and maybe to distract from his own alleged crimes. You take a few steps back, hiding behind a marble pillar. A waiter passes with a tray of pomegranate wine and spiced almonds. You wonder if any of the servers have noticed the smell, or if, like you, they've learned to breathe shallowly and not ask questions. Eventually, someone begins to sing, a soft, slow lament. You catch the words, something about light, truth, and sacrifice. The singer's voice cracks, but no one seems to notice. It's background music. Another gust of wind sends sparks swirling into the air, catching briefly in a tree before dying out. A child claps. A noblewoman leans in to whisper something scandalous to her companion. You stare at the flames again against your better judgment and catch a flicker of movement. One of the victims isn't dead yet, not fully. You can tell by the twitching hand, the way the fingers curl like burnt leaves before stiffening. Somewhere, a laugh echoes across the lawn. You ask yourself, is this punishment, or is this power pretending to be justice? You already know the answer. The curtain rises, but there's something off. The crowd is too quiet. The stage is too bare. You shift in your seat and glance at the person next to you, who doesn't seem concerned that the lead actor is chained to a post and clearly shaking. Welcome to Execution by Theatre Rome's most surreal blend of drama and death. It starts innocently enough. A playbill announces a tragic reenactment of the myth of Prometheus, classic stuff. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that this version skips the metaphor and goes straight to method acting. The actor isn't acting. He's being punished. Roman theater could be dramatic, but sometimes it got deadly. In these grisly spectacles, condemned criminals were forced to play mythological roles that ended with their real deaths, all in front of a well-dressed audience nibbling figs and murmuring critiques about the pacing. This isn't just punishment. This is entertainment with consequences. Tonight, the story is Prometheus, the Titan who stole fire and was punished by being chained to a rock while an eagle feasted daily on his liver. Except here, the rock is painted plaster, the chains are real, and the eagle, It's not a metaphor. It's an actual trained bird, flapping its wings impatiently as handlers guide it toward the man strapped to the stage. The crowd leans in. Some whisper, others smirk. One older woman near the front claps twice in delight. You shift in your seat again, feeling sick. The eagle swoops. It lands awkwardly, but effectively, talons scratching against the actor's bare chest. He screams, and it's no stage scream. It's the kind that makes your bones ring. The audience murmurs again, and someone says, "Impressive realism." You want to leave. You can't. Historians still argue about the frequency of these fatal dramas. Some suggest they were rare events reserved for particularly high-profile festivals or imperial amusement. Others think they were more common than records suggest, hidden beneath vague reports of spectacles and stage displays. What's not up for debate is that they happened, at least once. Probably more. Another famous example? The story of Orpheus. A criminal is dressed in flowing robes, handed a lyre, and sent into a fake forest set on stage. As he plays, a bear is released. The crowd loves it. Orpheus doesn't get an encore. The performance you're watching now continues. The bird returns. The actor sags. You glance at the musicians. Are they still playing? Yes, a soft flute melody, strangely cheerful. It's one thing to be executed. It's another to be told, "Smile, you're on stage." You look closer and realize the actor is wearing a crude mask, a stiff face molded into agony. For the crowd, it's symbolic. For him, it's probably suffocating. There's something deeply Roman about this, transforming justice into narrative. They didn't just punish, they performed the punishment. A man who stole from the temple might be forced to play Icarus, strapped to wax wings and pushed from a platform. Someone who poisoned a well might be cast as Hercules fighting the Hydra, only to be eaten by a hidden mechanical beast, or in some cases, a real one. Scholars disagree on whether audiences always knew the actor would die. Were they complicit or deceived? But given the applause, the laughter, and the casual betting happening in the rows behind you, it's pretty clear. Everyone here understands what's happening, and they approve. The worst part is how normal it feels by the end. The curtain falls. The body is quietly removed. A new act begins, a comedy, light and slapstick. A jester dances out, making fun of the Imperial Guard. The audience laughs like nothing happened. You sit frozen. The air smells of oil lamps and something else. Something coppery. A young couple in front of you debates whether the eagle was too slow. Next time, one says, they should use two. The first time the Romans did this, it probably caused outrage, maybe even discomfort. But by now, it's tradition. Like fireworks or halftime shows, you stand, finally, and make your way toward the exit. Your legs feel heavy. Your mind won't stop replaying the scene. The sound, the stillness after, the flute. On your way out, you pass a merchant selling wooden figurine Prometheus dolls with movable wings. Kids clamor to get one. A man nudges you, chuckling. Great performance, wasn't it? You manage a nod. Yeah, breathtaking. You don't mean that as a compliment. You're tied to a marble bench in what looks like a wealthy merchant's courtyard. The tiles are clean, the olive trees are trimmed, and there's even a small fountain gurgling cheerfully nearby. Honestly, it's peaceful until they start tickling your feet. At first, you laugh. It's instinctual, involuntary, absurd. Someone's brushing soft feathers against the soles of your feet, and your body can't help but respond. You wriggle, stifle a giggle, try to act unimpressed. But they don't stop. Minutes pass, then 10, then 20, and the smile slides off your face as the laughter keeps coming, whether you want it to or not. Your stomach hurts. Your lungs burn. Your mind begins to fray around the edges. This isn't fun anymore. You've entered the strange world of Roman tickle torture. Now, before you write this off as some over-the-top historical prank, know that this was real enough to terrify people. In one method, they soaked your feet in salt water and let a goat lick the mitt's tongue rough and relentless. At first it tickled, then it burned, then it chafed skin, and finally, if you were unlucky, it bled. Today, though, you get the feathered version. The worst part is the performance. You're surrounded by curious onlookers, lounging in shaded colonnades, sipping watered wine while your giggles echo off the stone walls. A servant with surprisingly good posture runs the feather under your toes again. You beg for it to stop, but that just encourages him. A few more servants enter. They've brought another feather. You don't know whether to scream or cry. It's said that some Roman households used this method not just for punishment, but discipline. Disobedient slaves, gossipy servants, or even misbehaving children might be subjected to a bout of feather-fueled humiliation, especially if the goal was to teach, not maim. But your case is different. This isn't domestic correction. This is a public punishment for satire. Yes, satire. You made the unfortunate mistake of mocking a minor noble in a poem passed around at dinner. A few lines about his wig, a joke about his breath. Standard stuff. The kind of thing that gets you applause in a less imperial setting. Here, though, you get feathers. Historians still argue whether this method was officially sanctioned or simply a convenient form of soft torture adopted by private citizens. There's little record of courts prescribing it, but plenty of anecdotes suggest it happened, often as a social or political statement. The message was clear. You went too far. Let's see you laugh now. And you are laughing. Painfully. Horribly. Your cheeks are wet with tears, but no one takes pity. If anything, your audience is more engaged now, watching with mild amusement as you thrash and plead. One older woman leans over to a young scribe and says, "Remind me, what was the line he wrote?" The scribe flips through his notes and chuckles, reciting it aloud. The crowd laughs harder than you ever did when you wrote it. That's the thing about Rome. Words were power, but they could also be your undoing. A sharp tongue might win friends, but it also painted targets. The empire could tolerate dissent sometimes, but never mockery. Not without consequence. The servant changes rhythm, now brushing upward with long, deliberate strokes. You've lost track of time. Your throat is raw. Your limbs ache from straining. And somewhere, in the blur of overstimulated agony, you feel something deeper. Shame. It's not just the physical discomfort. It's the helplessness. The way your own laughter has been twisted into something pitiful, powerless. One ancient writer described a case where a philosopher was tickled until he lost his voice, and then tickled still. A fringe detail, maybe exaggerated, but somehow right now, it doesn't feel far-fetched at all. The audience begins to thin, the joke's wearing off. A few nobles yawn, check the sun's position, and wander back indoors for lunch. Your punishment is no longer the main event. It's a lingering side act, just noise. Eventually, the feather slows. The servant pauses. A nod from someone in authority ends the session. Your restraints are loosened. You slump forward, dazed and twitching, body still convulsing in phantom giggles. Your legs tremble as you're dragged to a bench in the shade, where a guard drops a crust of bread into your lap and walks away without a word. You chew slowly, staring at your feet. They look the same, but they feel ruined. You try to remember the lines of the poem, the rhyme scheme, the clever turn of phrase. It's all gone. Only the echo of your laughter remains and the cold sting of knowing that in Rome, even humor could be a crime. You step into a quiet, dimly lit chamber that smells faintly of cedar and old iron. The door closes behind you with a dull thunk, and the air seems to thicken instantly, swallowing the outside world. No cheering crowds, no chanting mobs. Just stone, silence, and something ominously ceremonial. You're about to be crucified. Indoors. Which, in some twisted way, almost feels polite. But don't get your hopes up. This isn't mercy, this is control. Unlike the brutal crucifixions you've heard about, the ones outside the city gates with sun-scorched corpses lining the roads, this version is curated. Private. No sand. No vultures. Just precision and eerie calm. Two figures in dark tunics move in sync, laying out tools. Wooden beams, iron nails, a hammer, a small bowl of water that you sincerely hope isn't ceremonial. You've seen this play out in public. You've even heard the screams drifting on the wind. But this setting feels different, like you're part of a rite rather than a punishment. Crucifixion was Rome's loudest death sentence. But this? This is whispering. Historians still argue whether these private crucifixions were common, or if this was reserved for certain crimes, mostly slaves, traitors, or prisoners whose deaths had to happen discreetly. Maybe the state didn't want a martyr. Maybe the family paid for something less visible. But there's nothing quiet about what's coming. Your back meets the crossbeam. Rough wood, sticky with something that might be resin, or might be old blood. The guards work methodically. No shouting, no spitting. They could be folding laundry, for all the emotion they show. One ties your wrist gently as if to brace you, then drives in the first nail. The pain is sharp, immediate, and electric. You scream. Of course you do. The sound bounces off the stone walls and goes nowhere. No audience here to gasp or whisper. Just echoes, and maybe the faint shuffle of a bored servant down the hall. Roman crucifixion wasn't just execution, it was degradation. It stripped you of dignity, of identity, of silence. Yet here, without the roar of the crowd, the degradation feels strangely focused. More intimate. They lift the crossbeam and fasten it to the upright post. You hang like laundry, arms stretched, ribs rising with every shallow breath. The second nail goes into your feet or ankles, depending on the executioner's preference. Scholars still debate exactly how the body was nailed. Feet together, one atop the other, ankles straddling the post. Each theory has its gruesome merits, but what's undeniable is the result. Suffocation, strain, and exhaustion. You don't die from bleeding. You die from slowly being crushed by your own weight. You wheeze, trying to shift. The movement sends lightning up your spine. One of the attendants dabs your forehead with a cloth. You'd thank them if you could speak. In public crucifixions, the condemned were often left for days. Their bodies became warnings, their stench a boundary marker. But indoors, that luxury isn't allowed. This has to be quicker, cleaner. You wonder if they'll finish it now, or simply leave you to fade away between polished walls and expensive incense. You notice something carved into the stone above you. A name. Not yours. Probably the last person who died here. Some believe these private crucifixions served ritual purposes, not just punishment, but purification. To silence someone forever, not just end their life. There's even fringe speculation that secret sects within Rome used crucifixion as a form of spiritual reset, though that theory is mostly dismissed. Still, as your vision begins to swim, it doesn't feel entirely wrong. You try to focus on anything, the pattern of the floor tiles, the rhythm of your breath, the damp corner of the ceiling, but the pain pulls you back every time. You think of stories you've heard of condemned men singing psalms, whispering curses, begging for water. You don't feel poetic. You just want it to stop. A guard stirs, steps closer. You brace. But instead of mercy, he pulls a small tablet from his satchel and hangs it above your head. It reads your crime in blocky Latin. Insolentia. Insolence. That's all it took. A word spoken too boldly. A refusal to bow. Maybe a joke that didn't land in the right ears. You can't even remember anymore. Your arms are numb now. The pain has dulled into something colder, more distant. You blink slowly. The edges of the room blur. The guards murmur. One mentions dinner, another yawns. You're no longer the main event. You're just part of the decor now, like the stone urn in the corner, or the chipped bust of some senator no one remembers. And somehow, that's the most Roman thing of all, being punished not with chaos, but with perfect, measured indifference. They take your dagger, your ring, your dignity then, your hair. Not gently, not ceremonially, just a fast, scraping tear through your scalp with dull shears, in full view of the neighborhood. The blade catches more skin than it should. You wince, not from pain, but from the sound. The watching crowd winces too, but not out of sympathy. It's embarrassment. Not for what's happening to you, but for who you used to be. You were a patrician, rich, educated, smug if we're being honest. And now you're being punished, not with death, not even with prison, but with a haircut. This is Rome's equivalent of cancel culture. Public shearing wasn't just about looks. It was about status. And in Rome, hair wasn't just vanity, it was politics, identity, standing. And when the state decided you needed humbling, the shears came out. There's no trial. Not for this. Just an official nod from someone in a slightly cleaner toga, and you're led to a stool in the middle of the forum. Two bored attendants grab your shoulders. One has a pair of iron clippers that haven't been sharpened since Caligula was funny. You expect some ritual, a speech, maybe a little chant. Instead, you get a bucket of cold water dumped over your head and a shout of, "Hold still," and then the scraping begins. It's patchy, brutal. One swipe leaves a flap of hair dangling over your left eye. Another takes a chunk from your temple, exposing pale, clammy skin to the sun. The crowd starts murmuring. Somewhere, someone snorts. A child giggles. The thing is, Romans cared about hair. A lot. Rich men oiled it, curled it, combed it into elegant waves. Emperors had favored barbers. Entire columns of gossip were devoted to who wore what style. If your part was crooked, people noticed. So when they decided to punish you this way, it wasn't random. It was targeted humiliation. And yes, women faced it too. A disgraced Vestal virgin, for example, would have her hair cut short before burial, symbolically stripping her of purity before the earth finished the job. For men, especially high-status ones, the haircut said, "You are no longer who you were." Historians still argue whether public shearing was an official sentence or more of a culturally accepted punishment, kind of like being unfollowed by the Senate. But it happened, often, especially to military deserters, corrupt officials, and loudmouth poets. You qualify on at least 2 counts. There's something oddly slow about the process. You thought it would be over in a few minutes, but they linger. Take their time, like they're sculpting or savoring it. You hear one of the barbers mutter, "Almost got the left side even." And you'd laugh if your pride wasn't bleeding all over your sandals. Finally, they step back. One flicks your ear for good measure. You're shoved off the stool and handed a small polished bowl to see yourself. Oh no. You look like a molting goose. Patches of hair cling like wet moss. Your forehead gleams like a marble countertop. And worst of all, they left your eyebrows just to be cruel. The crowd reacts the way Romans always did, with a mix of scorn and delight. Some cheer. A few pretend not to look but definitely are. One young woman whispers, "He was handsome before." You want to explain, to argue, to reclaim something. But instead, you just wrap your arms around your head and duck into the nearest alley. You pass a fountain and consider dunking your whole body in. But a guard's already watching, just in case you try to cleanse your punishment. That's the rule. You wear the shame for a while. How long? Depends on who you offended. If it was a low-ranking officer, maybe a week of ugly. But if it was a senator or worse, the emperor, you're looking at months, maybe even a new nickname. Calvus, perhaps. The bald one. Rome never forgets. The shearing wasn't always standalone either. Sometimes it came with exile, or a ban from public speaking. One philosopher and outspoken critic of Narawa's first banned from teaching, then exiled, then forcibly shorn, then executed. In that order, the haircut, it seems, was the warning shot. You reach your insula, modest tenement you're now barely welcome in. Your landlord takes one look at your head and sighs. So, that kind of day? You nod. He lets you in, but just barely. Inside, you stare at your reflection in a bowl of water. You touch the back of your scalp. It's sticky with sweat, uneven, still stinging from where they nicked skin. Your old identity, your face, your pride has been hacked away. It's just hair, you think. It'll grow back. But you know that's not really true. Because in Rome, some punishments don't scar the body. They scar the social map. The stench hits you before the sentence is even finished. You're standing beside what you thought was just another public latrina place to avoid, unless you were desperate or deeply Roman about such things. But apparently, it's not just a toilet. It's your destination, your punishment. They're going to throw you in it. Technically, the term is Phulonica purgatio, sanitation punishment. But everyone just calls it the pit. And once you're down there, it doesn't really matter what it's called. You try to appeal to someone. Surely there's been a mistake. But the centurion guarding the entrance just gestures with a thumb. In you go. The Phulonica, basically an ancient Roman laundromat, relied heavily on urine. That's right, collected from amphorae stationed on every corner. Because in Roman chemistry, pee was a surprisingly good detergent. Fullers used it to clean togas, whiten wool, and strip stains. But not all Philonici were honest businesses. Some had a second purpose. Punishment pits. Down beneath the surface there were foul, slurry chambers, repositories of waste and runoff. And occasionally, people. You teeter on the edge. The lip is crusted with limescale. The air wafting up is thick with ammonia and shame. And then they push. You hit the sludge with a splash and immediately regret every single life decision that led you here. It's worse than you imagined. Your skin burns. Your eyes water. The floor is soft in the wrong ways, and nothing solid is where it should be. There's movement in the muck. Something squeaks, or burps. It's hard to tell. Punishment by latrine wasn't about physical pain. Not exactly. It was about disgrace. You weren't beaten or broken. You were covered in waste, symbolically reduced to the things society threw away. Historically, this type of punishment was mostly reserved for debtors, petty thieves, and especially corrupt municipal officials, people who had, quite literally, soiled the public trust. And while some were just made to clean latrines as penance, others like you got the immersive version. You hear voices above, laughter. Coins are being exchanged. There's betting. Great. You're someone's entertainment again. One person leans over and says, "Make him crawl for it." And suddenly a rope is dropped down. You grab it, relieved until they yank it back up again. Ha ha. You stew in silence. Literally, historians still argue whether this punishment was formally sanctioned or simply encouraged by custom. Some accounts mention fullers being legally allowed to detain and punish thieves who stole from their shops. Others hint at more underground arrangements, where bribes allowed certain officials to unofficially dispose of a problem in the most literal way possible. Your tunic soaks up the worst of it. The stench is already embedded in your skin. You try not to breathe, but that's not sustainable. Somewhere nearby, a pipe gurgles. More liquid sloshes into the pit. Fresh. Warm. You don't want to know. You spot a plank leaning against one wall and attempt to climb it, slipping twice before finally getting purchase. The wood creaks under your weight, and your hands slide on the slime. As you haul yourself up, the crowd cheers sarcastically. A boy throws a peach petite, bounces off your head with a wet plop. You're not even angry, just sticky, and a little dead inside. They let you out. That's the worst part. They let you go. No further sentencing. No guards escorting you to a cell. You're simply done. Like a shirt that's been washed. You're free to wander back into the city. The rule, of course, is that you're not allowed to clean yourself for a full day. Part of the punishment. You wear your filth as a warning to others. You slosh through the street, dripping, foaming slightly. People wrinkle their noses. Friends cross the road. Dogs bark at you. Even the beggars scoot away. One merchant hands you a small coin, maybe out of pity, maybe as a bribe to keep moving. You pass a statue of the goddess Cloacinathi, protector of Rome's sewer system, and you almost laugh. Almost. In a way, you suppose this is poetic. You wronged the public, and the public wronged you right back. Fair enough. But as you sit beneath an awning, dripping into a cracked terracotta bowl, and wondering how long the smell will last, you realize something darker. This wasn't just about punishment. This was about reminder. Every time someone smells you walk by, they remember what happens to those who step out of line. And so do you. The boat is small, creaky, and insultingly casual. No guards, no chains. Just a single oarsman who hasn't spoken since you climbed aboard. You're not bound, why bother? Where you're going, there's nowhere else to go. Exile, they said. Not execution. A merciful alternative. But as the boat pulls away from the mainland and the shoreline shrinks behind you, you realize, this isn't mercy. It's removal. You try to ask where you're being sent. The oarsman just gestures to the sea and rows harder. Eventually, the outline of a rock appears on the horizon, small, flat, and unwelcoming. No harbor, no trees, no buildings. Just a bald lump of volcanic stone surrounded by gulls and salt spray. This is your sentence. Exile to a nowhere island. Exile was a common Roman punishment, especially for disgraced officials, poets with sharp tongues, and generals who lost the wrong battle. Technically, it was supposed to preserve your life. In practice, it often just postponed your death, replacing drama with dehydration. As the boat crunches against the rocks, the oarsman tosses you a small sack-dried figs, a half loaf of barley bread, and a water skin that already feels light. He doesn't wait to see you off, just pushes away and rows back toward civilization without a word. You're alone, not metaphorically, literally. There's no one else here. No animals, no plants, just wind, rock, and your thoughts. You sit on a slope and try to imagine this place under different circumstances, as a resort maybe, a spa getaway. Others not even shade. Historians still debate whether these Rock Island exiles were ever meant to be survivable. Was the intent slow death? Or was it a twisted show of leniency, life spared? Technically, but stripped of meaning. You wonder how long you can last on salted bread and sunstroke. Some Romans sentenced to exile were allowed to take family or servants. Others weren't. You weren't. You think back to the magistrate's wording, exilium sine comitatu exile, without companions. That phrase alone was enough to make grown men weep. A gust of wind kicks dust into your face. You take shelter behind a jagged boulder and survey your kingdom. One large rock, 3 gulls, and the bones of something that may have once been a goat. You try yelling, once, twice. The sound is swallowed by the sea. In the distance, a ship sails past. Too far to see you, too far to care. Exile, unlike execution, gives you time. Time to reflect, time to regret, time to compose dramatic speeches to no one in particular. You try one. Oh, Rome, how swiftly you discard those who serve. It echoes nicely. You give it a second take. You're not sure whether you're rehearsing your memoirs or slowly losing your mind. Night falls quickly. The rock cools but doesn't comfort. You curl up against the wind, dreaming of baths and bread sellers and shouting in crowded forums. You wake to silence. By day 3, the gulls start getting bolder. They eye your food sack. You yell and wave your arms, but they just tilt their heads, unimpressed. One nips your ear. You swear revenge and immediately regret making enemies with the only life forms available. You wonder how many others have sat on this same rock. Exiles past, washed-up senators, unlucky poets, angry philosophers scribbling verse into the dirt before starving. You find a few scratches on the stone letters, names. It's hard to tell. Could be graffiti, could be someone trying to matter. You spend an afternoon carving your name into the rock with a broken seashell. It looks terrible, but it's something. Eventually, you see another boat on the horizon. Your heart leaps. Rescue? Maybe your sentence has been commuted. Maybe the emperor had a change of heart. You wave, shout, even strip off your tunic and spin it overhead. The boat turns. But not toward you. It circles your island, staying just far enough to be a taunt. You realize they're checking, making sure you're still here, still obedient, still broken. You lie back and watch the clouds. One looks like a wolf, another like a bowl of lentils. You're either getting poetic or hungry, probably both. Exile strips away more than freedom. It takes away witnesses. You start to forget who you were, how you spoke, the rhythm of street noise and market haggling. Your inner monologue gets louder, then quieter, then strange. There's a reason the ancients feared exile. Death was final. Exile was erasure. Eventually, you stop counting days. You watch the tides instead. You learn when the rock warms best. You find a small pool in a crevice that collects dew miraculous. You start talking to the gulls again. This time, they listen. And maybe, just maybe, that's the worst punishment of all. Not pain, not blood, not chains. Just being forgotten. The wine smells wrong the moment they hand it to you. Sharp, acrid. Like something that's spent too long in the sun, then been trampled by a goat and poured back into the amphora just to prove a point. Still, you drink. Because you've been ordered to. This is Pascarome's military wine. And by military wine, they mean vinegar, water, and disappointment. It's your punishment. Not execution, not flogging. Just a long, drawn-out humiliation in the form of compulsory hydration. You lift the cracked clay cup to your lips, and the taste punches your tongue like a petty praetor with something to prove. You gag. Someone laughs. Pascha wasn't always a punishment. It was standard fare for the lower ranks of the Roman army. A diluted vinegar and water mixture, tart and sour, allegedly good for avoiding scurvy and cleaning the palate if you didn't mind the flavor of boiled socks. But in your case, the vinegar is symbolic. You're drinking it because you disrespected your commanding officer. Not with a sword, not even with a speech, just a poorly timed eye roll when he mentioned his years of glorious service. Now you're stationed in the middle of the camp, sitting on a stool while a crowd watches you swallow mug after mug of sour justice. The worst part? They've added spices. Someone thought a touch of cumin might improve it. It hasn't. One centurion offers a toast, raising his own cup in mock sympathy. To humility, he says, and everyone chuckles. You try to maintain some dignity as you drink, but the liquid burns your throat and curls your tongue. You're sweating now. Your stomach is starting to argue with itself. Pascha was used by soldiers because wine was expensive. For them, this was a cheap, reliable way to stretch rations. But for you, it's a statement. You are no better than the rank and file. In fact, you're beneath them, because even they get to mix their own ratio of vinegar to water. You don't. A young recruit shouts, "Is it true he called the general's boots common?" The others laugh again. You stare into your cup and pray for something rain, a distraction, a sudden bout of plague. Anything. One historian wrote that Roman punishments were often designed to fit the flavor of the crime. In your case, it seems the flavor is bitterness. Your stomach churns. A few more cups in, and the humor wears off. The crowd starts to disperse. Some soldiers are already tossing dice and arguing about goat prices. You remain on the stool, slumped, holding a cup of what might technically be classified as acid. One sympathetic veteran claps you on the shoulder. "First time?" he asks. You nod weakly. "Try holding your breath while you swallow," he says, as if sharing a wine-tasting secret. You try it. It doesn't help. Your punishment isn't meant to kill you. But you're not entirely convinced it won't. Your guts feel like they've been brined. You hiccup and taste regret. In the grand hierarchy of Roman consequences, Pascha duty is low tier. No scars. No exile. Just a bruised ego and a very upset digestive system. But there's something deeply Roman about it. The use of common things like vinegarto unmake uncommon pride. You finally stand, dizzy. Your knees wobble. You take a few steps and feel the world tilt sideways. Someone shouts, "Careful, don't spill the general's favorite vintage." More laughter. You make it to your tent just in time to empty the entire contents of your stomach into a bucket. There's something deeply undignified about vomiting vinegar in front of a borrowed bronze mirror. Later that night, the camp is quiet. You lie awake on your straw mat, stomach still twitching. Outside, a few men pass a flask of real wine. The good stuff. They don't offer you any. You reach for your water skin and hesitate. It smells faintly of Pascha. You set it down. Historians still debate whether Pascha punishment was ever officially codified or simply a practical invention of bored commanders. There's no surviving law that says, "Let the vinegar flow," but the accounts are frequent enough that you know you're not the first and won't be the last. Some soldiers swear Pascha builds character. Others say it just builds nausea. You pull your blanket tighter and stare at the canvas ceiling. Tomorrow, you'll be back on latrine duty, or hauling stones, or anything that doesn't involve another drop of sour, soul-curdling liquid. You close your eyes, and the taste still lingers. Sharp, lingering, unforgettable, just like Rome. The box is smaller than you expected. Not coffin small, more like can't straighten your knees small. You crouch inside it, back pressed against one wooden wall, feet braced against the other, trying not to panic as the front panel slides into place with a final, condescending thunk. You're part of the city now. Literally. They've caged you on a main thoroughfare, positioned between a bakery and a statue of Mars. A public display. Not for safety, not even for containment. Just display. This is your sentence. Caged confinement for moral offense. And that term, moral offense, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. You didn't steal. You didn't kill. You just wrote something. A line in a love letter. A private joke that someone found very unfunny. And now, you're a roadside curiosity. You shift, but the space doesn't allow it. The cage creaks. Someone kicks it playfully, maybe. Or not. You can't see them. The slats are narrow. It smells of wood, sweat, and yesterday's turnips. The Romans had an impressive relationship with cages. They used them for animals, yes, but also for people. Not criminals in the modern sense, but those who needed to be seen. Cheaters, debt dodgers, public nuisances, and now, apparently, amateur poets. This is damnatio per ostension and punishment by showing. You're not to be silenced, but shown off. Like a moral cautionary tale in sandals. A group of children walks past and points. One pretends to throw something. Another recites the insult you wrote poorly and giggles. You close your eyes. Historians still argue whether these cages were official devices or just the result of local magistrates getting creative. Some were designed like upright boxes, others more like bird cages. A few had signs. Yours does. It reads, "Pro fabula turpis," for a vulgar tale. You want to argue the semantics of vulgar, but the sign isn't accepting feedback. A vendor drapes a cloth over the cage mid-morning. Shade, maybe. Nohe's hanging sausages from the top rung. Great. You're meat adjacent now. You can smell them. You cannot reach them. Time slows inside the box. The day stretches. The sun moves. You count cobblestones. You learn to identify individuals by footstep. The soldier with the uneven limp. The old man with sandals that flap. The teenager who always whistles and never says a word. You get thirsty. Of course you do. Around noon, someone tosses a crust of bread into the cage. It's stale. You eat it anyway. You don't cry. Not here. You'll save that for later, when the shutters close and the city forgets about you. Because that's the strangest part. This isn't torture. Technically, it's not supposed to hurt. You've got air. You've got light. You're not bleeding. But you are unraveling. The cage traps more than your body. It traps the story around you. People stop and speculate. He insulted the governor's sister, someone says. No, I heard he sang a rude song about Mars, says another. One man insists you're a runaway scribe who forged a will. None of them are right. All of them are convinced. Eventually, a performer sets up nearby. He juggles knives while you try not to flinch. The crowd gathers for him, not you, and somehow that stings more than the mockery. You're not even the main attraction anymore. You wonder how long you'll be here. Some accounts say a day, others a week. One poor soul was allegedly forgotten in his box until a cat took up residence beneath him. You'd welcome the company. Evening falls. The crowd thins. The air cools, and the smells shift from sweat and market stew to baking bread and coal smoke. The city settles, but your muscles do not. You try to stretch. Can't. You try to sleep. Can't. A rat sniffs near your feet. You consider making it your new best friend. Eventually, someone you don't recognize approaches. A low-ranking scribe, maybe. He unlocks the cage with a rusty key and waves you out like he's opening a broom closet. You're free, he says. Are you? You stumble out, blinking. The street feels too wide. The sky too open. You forget how to walk without hitting something. No applause. No declaration. Just a quick release, and then the world moves on without you. You pass your own cage on the way home. Still standing. Still smelling faintly of shame and sausage. Tomorrow, it will hold someone else, and Rome will keep watching. It's dark. Not the kind of dark where your eyes adjust and start picking out shapes, but the kind that swallows everything. You blink, and it's the same. You raise your hand, and it might as well not exist. Even your breath feels quieter down here. You're under the forum, and you are not getting out anytime soon. They call it the Tullianum, lower chamber, beneath Rome's oldest prison. A space so removed from light and air that time itself seems reluctant to enter. It's more pit than room, hewn out of volcanic rock, circular and claustrophobic. You can't stand fully upright, and the ceiling drips with condensation that might be water, or the tears of every poor soul who's rotted here before you. There's a chain bolted into the wall, but they haven't used it. They don't need to. The space is the restraint. Above, the city continues its day. People haggle over olives. Horses clatter down the streets. Senators drone on about taxes. And directly beneath their sandals, you lie in silence with rats for company. This punishment? It's not official, not listed in any law code with a fancy Latin name, but it's real. It's custom, reserved for those they don't want seen, but aren't quite ready to kill. You tried to run. From debt. From disgrace. Maybe even from a marriage you definitely shouldn't have arranged with two different people at once. Now you run nowhere. You think about yelling. Once. Just to test the acoustics. But your voice feels too heavy. Like it wouldn't bounce, it would just sink. Historians still argue about the Tullianum. Was it meant to hold people long-term, or just as a waiting room for execution? Some say it was a sacred space, its entrance once used for ritual cleansing. Others insist it was nothing but a death chamber dressed in tradition. You lie on the cold floor and wonder which is worse. There's no bedding, no bucket, just a stone slab in the middle that might have been an altar or maybe a dinner table for rats. You lie back against the wall and listen. A faint drip echoes through the chamber. Somewhere above, someone laughs. The sound floats down like a reminder of what you're missing. A guard visits only once a day. Maybe. You lose track quickly. When he does, he brings a crust of bread and a bowl of water. Sometimes he forgets the water. Once, he brought lentils. You cried a little. You learn the rhythms of hunger, of thirst. You learn to move less, to think slower. Your thoughts flatten into loops. How did I end up here? What day is it? What did I do? What did I do? What did I do? One morning or evening, hard to tell, you notice a name scratched into the wall, Marcus F. The rest is lost to erosion, but now you know someone else sat right where you're sitting. You trace the letters with your fingertip like a prayer. Later, you find more carvings. A tally of lines, maybe days, maybe deaths. A rough image of a bird, someone dreaming of escape. You imagine scratching your own mark into the stone, but it feels premature. You're not sure you belong here yet. Not like they did. The worst part is knowing you're beneath the forum. Above you, men argue policy. Citizens argue prices. Tourists admire architecture. All of them walking inches over your head, utterly unaware or worse, deliberately aware of who's buried beneath their politics. It wasn't always criminals. Some were war captives, generals, even kings. Jugurtha, king of Numidia, starved down here. Sejanus, once Rome's most powerful man, was strangled and dumped through the ceiling hatch. And now? You? You hum quietly to keep time. Not a song, just noise. Something to push back the silence. Your voice shakes less now. You're getting used to the darkness. Maybe that's what this punishment is really about. Not death. Not pain. Just removal. A pause button on your life. A sentence with no climax. A chapter left open, unfinished, and unread. Eventually, when they do open the hatch, you're not even startled, just curious. The torchlight sears your eyes. A shape leans in. "You've been moved," he says. No explanation. You crawl out, blinking, skin pale and paper thin. You're not executed. You're not pardoned. You're simply released. No one cheers. No one explains. The forum looks the same. You walk past senators who don't recognize you. You pass a fountain you once admired, now foreign. A woman drops a coin into a beggar's bowl. You have less than he does. You want to speak, to scream, to say, "I was down there." But no one's listening. And Rome? Rome has already forgotten. You kneel in the center of a quiet chamber, arms bound loosely, hair hanging limp. A hush has settled over the marble floor like a funeral shroud. No chains, no shouts, just the rustle of ceremonial robes and the faint chime of a bell echoing from somewhere above. Beside you stands a Vestal Virgin, or rather, one who used to be. Today is her last day above ground, not for reasons of age or battle or plague. Noscia broke her vow of chastity. Or, someone says she did, and in Rome, that isn't a scandal, it's sacrilege. A priest steps forward and recites the charges with the emotional weight of someone reading a weather report. Unchaste conduct, violation of sacred flame, deed unspoken, sentence prescribed. No one says her name, they won't again. Her punishment is not loud. No lions, no swords, just a pit. She is to be buried alive, and the cruelty of it lies not in violence, but in ritual. No one touches her roughly. She's treated with the same mechanical reverence one might reserve for folding linens. Wrapped in her white robe, she is led through the forum, not bound in chains, but shadowed by silence. The people do not jeer, they look away. She is the unspoken thing everyone fears, a crack in the sacred order. The pit waits. Carved out beneath the city, it's a chamber just large enough to lie down in. A couch, a lamp, a loaf of bread, a jug of water. The state calls this mercy. We do not kill her, the magistrates say. We leave her to the gods. But you've seen mercy. This isn't it. She descends the wooden ladder without hesitation. Her foot slips slightly, but she catches herself. Her face is not defiant, not scared, just still. The lid is lowered, then stone, then dirt. You hear the first dull thump of soil falling. She is still alive, and now she is not, at least not in Rome's eyes. She's been erased. Historians still debate whether the Vestals always died this way. Some argue that the burial was symbolic, that the women were later removed or secretly spared. Others insist there was no escape, no loophole, just ceremonial death sealed under official silence. No record exists of a Vestal returning, no memoir, no rumor, just the dirt. You remember her face, wide-eyed, alert, unblinking, as if trying to memorize the sky. You wonder whether she prayed, whether she held her breath at the end, whether it mattered. Because the truth is, she didn't just fall short of a vow, she failed as a symbol. And in Rome, symbols must be spotless or buried. Later, children play above the unmarked site. A boy jokes, "Don't fall into the ghost hole." You wince. There's no plaque, no stone, no flowers, just a vague patch of ground where a young woman once stood too close to the edge of power. And that's the most Roman thing of all. How neatly they wrap brutality in silence, how clean the ceremony is, how no one ever screams. Not the priests, not the people, not even her. You speak once, just once, and that's enough. A clever line, a passing joke, a sharp barb about a senator's new statue, and how it looked more like a turnip than a statesman. You say it at dinner, in a circle of so-called friends, and within a week, you're stripped of your toga, your stipend, and your social standing. Not by sword, not by fire, but by something far worse. Paperwork. The Romans had a punishment so quiet, so bloodless, that most people didn't even realize it was happening until it was already over. It didn't involve prisons or galleys or executioners. It involved forms, reports, accusations written in elegant calligraphic Latin, passed through marble halls until someone stamped them with wax and sent you into oblivion. They called it interdictio, or sometimes infamia, depending on the flavor. But to you, it feels like being erased by bureaucracy. You try to argue your case. Of course you do. You request a hearing. You write letters. You quote Cicero. No one replies. You are removed from the roster of the Senate. Your name disappears from official lists. Your property? Frozen. Your account at the baths? Closed. Your favorite chair at the library? Taken by a man who pretends not to know who you are. You are alive. Yes, but you no longer exist in the way that matters. You think this must be a mistake, that someone will realize, that someone with a higher rank, a cooler head, will overturn it. But days pass, then weeks. You start receiving notice-tiny, folded things left at your door. You are now forbidden to speak in court. You may not testify, you may not publish. You may not own slaves, nor hire scribes. If you're seen at the theater, they will seat you behind the servants. The punishment is so slow, so meticulous, it doesn't feel like punishment at all. Not until you walk into your favorite bakery and the man behind the counter suddenly forgets your name. Not until your tailor starts sewing your tunics half an inch too short. Not until the neighbor who once borrowed your books avoids your gaze as if your shadow might get him exiled too. Historians still argue whether Rome's soft punishments were more effective than its brutal ones. A beheading is quick. A crucifixion is dramatic. But this turns your entire identity against you. And what's worse, it enlists everyone else to help. The city doesn't beat you. It just stops acknowledging that you're worth the trouble. One philosopher once called this punishment a death of influence. He might have been right. Your friends still nod to you across the forum, but they don't stop. Invitations stop arriving. Your name is no longer sung in praise or curse. It's just air. You try to make noise. You stage a public reading. No one shows up. You send petitions. They return unopened. You print pamphlets and leave them in temples, and someone burns them overnight. At some point, you stop speaking entirely, not because you're forbidden, but because you forget what it sounds like to be heard. The final straw comes quietly, as all things do now. You arrive at your villa, your former villa, and find a seal across the door. The Senate has reassigned it. You gather what you can carry and sleep on a friend's floor, in the guest room once reserved for slaves. In the morning, you see a pigeon land on your windowsill. You joke weakly that even the birds might avoid you soon. No one laughs. Later, you walk the streets, watching Rome bustle without you. You pass a young man reciting your words without knowing they came from you. You smile. That's something, at least. You might be silent. But the echo remains. And that's when it hits you. This punishment wasn't about silencing your voice. It was about forcing you to hear it fade. The iron is already hot when they bring it out, and you can hear it before you see it, the low, angry hum of something too ready. A thin wisp of smoke curls upward from the tip, sharp as vinegar in your nostrils. You try to step back, but the guards tighten their grip. There's no fight in you left anyway. You've already been caught. Now, they'll make sure everyone knows it. Branding. You thought it was for animals. Slaves, maybe. Not for you. But Rome has other ideas. They push you forward into a courtyard. A small crowd has gathered. Nothing official and no stage. No senator, but enough witnesses to make sure your shame won't die in private. Someone murmurs your name. Another points and says, "Thief." You want to correct them. It was a misunderstanding, a bookkeeping error, a favor owed. But no one's here to listen. They're here to see the smoke and the scar. A magistrate steps forward holding a wooden plaque, 3 letters etched deep into the surface. Fur, Latin for thief, short, brutal. Ironic, considering you weren't even very good at it. Branding wasn't reserved for hardened criminals. Rome liked efficiency. A stolen coin, a forged will, or even borrowing something without permission could earn you the mark. If they didn't want to execute you, and they often didn't, they mark you forever. Not to hurt, but to label. The guard lifts your tunic. The skin on your upper arm tightens with the breeze. Then the iron comes down. It's not the pain that surprises you, it's how fast it happens. A flash, a hiss, a sound you feel more than hear. Your teeth clench, your knees buckle. The world swims. You expect someone to cheer or jeer, but it's quiet, almost bored. The punishment is the point, not the performance. Historians still debate where exactly the brand was placed. Some sources say the forehead, bold and undeniable. Others mention the hand, shoulder, or thigh. Yours is on your arm, just below the sleeve line. Easy to hide, impossible to forget. You're handed a rough tunic and told to leave. That's it. No healing ointment, no words of explanation, no lecture. Just the mark. The smell of your own scorched skin clings to you as you walk through the city. People glance, some with pity, some with that particular Roman mixture of smugness and relief. At least it's not me. You stop by a fountain to rinse the wound, but the cold water only makes it throb. A child points. What does that letter mean? His mother hushes him quickly. You consider wrapping your arm, hiding the scar. But that's another punishment. Now you live with the risk of discovery. The accusation doesn't have to be repeated. It's burned into your flesh, legible to anyone who wants to read it. At the market, a butcher refuses to hand you change. You hold out your left hand instead. He squints, sees the mark, and shrugs. "No credit," he says. Later, a friend spots you and smiles, but it fades when he sees your arm. "I'd invite you in," he says, "but you know." Yes, you know. Rome had no patience for forgetting. The branding wasn't about justice. It was about memory. Not yours, theirs. So that every time you tried to blend in again, the city would remember. So you couldn't run from what they said you were, even if it was never true to begin with. Some branded men found ways to make it work. They turned the letter into a badge, claimed it proudly. Others left the city, tried to vanish into distant provinces. One man, you recall, wore long sleeves year-round and told strangers it was a battle wound. It worked until someone recognized the shape beneath the cloth. You sit under an olive tree at dusk, arm burning, silence growing. You trace the letter with your finger. It's raised, ugly, permanent, and strangely quiet. No drums, no crowd, no trial, just 3 seconds of fire, and a lifetime of glances that last too long. You fall to your knees, not because of the pain, though there's plenty of that, but because the crowd demands it. They're all around you, buzzing like hornets, faces red with fury, sandals stomping, fists shaking, voices crashing over each other in a rising tide of rage. And you? You're the storm drain for it all. This isn't an official punishment. No judge pounded a staff, no scroll was read aloud, but you're being punished just the same by the mob, and with their full enthusiasm. You try to speak, to explain. It was a misunderstanding, but your voice is instantly drowned out by the clamor of curses and accusations. Liar, cheat, shame. The words hit harder than the first stone. And then comes the second. What started as shouting becomes action, quick and chaotic. Someone slaps you across the face. Someone else shoves you down. You barely manage to brace your fall before a sandal catches your ribs. The blows aren't coordinated. That would almost make them noble. This is messy, furious, personal. You're in the middle of a populous poena punishment by the people. Rare, but very real. Sometimes, Rome's citizens decided not to wait for the courts. It usually started with rumors. That a merchant shorted the grain weights. That a landlord turned away a widow. That a senator mocked the gods in private. All it took was one whispered accusation and the scent of outrage in the air. The law might come later, but the crowd always came first. You stumble, trying to get up. A man hurls a rotten onion at your shoulder. Someone spits. Someone else laughs. The entire square smells of sweat and vengeance. You'd expect soldiers to intervene, but they don't. They stand at the edges, arms crossed, watching. In some cases, historians say, the state allowed the mob to carry out its own justice, especially if the offense was seen as a slight against public decency or civic harmony. Why dirty your hands when the people are eager to do it for you? And besides, the crowd isn't technically breaking any laws, just being passionately expressive, right? You take another step, and someone trips you with a broom handle. You fall hard this time, chin scraping the gravel. Your arms instinctively curl over your head as feet and fists rain down. It's not an execution, but it's not one either. Eventually, the anger starts to lose momentum, not because justice has been served, but because people get tired. The shoving becomes poking. The yelling fades to muttering. One man, clearly disappointed, gives you a parting kick and grumbles. He's not even fighting back. Then he walks away. That's how it ends, not with a trial, not with forgiveness, just fatigue. You lie in the dirt, chest heaving, skin burning, mouth full of dust. You're not dead, but you're no longer whole either. Someone tosses a coin near your head, charity or mockery. You're not sure. You sit up slowly, vision swimming. The square is emptying out. Life resumes. A fruit seller reopens her stall. A group of children resume their game of knucklebones, as if you were just a passing cloud. You shuffle toward a fountain, the cool water shocking against your swollen skin. You rinse your face. Your reflection stares back bloodied, bruised, wild-eyed. It doesn't look like you anymore. And still, no one speaks to you. You remember reading once that Rome prided itself on its laws, its systems, its order. And yet, here you are, punished with no process at all. Not because a judge found you guilty, but because a crowd felt you were. Historians debate how often this happened. Some say it was rare and frowned upon. Others argue that the mob was just another arm of Roman power, a wild, unofficial one, but effective. A warning that the people could be just as cruel as the state. You limp home through streets that feel colder now, more foreign. You pass a vendor who served you yesterday. He avoids your eyes. You think about how easily it happened. No trial, no appeal, no chance to explain. Just one bad rumor and a spark of anger in the right crowd. That's all it took. And that's the terrifying thing about being punished by the people. There's no sentence to end, because even after the bruises fade, they still remember what they think you did. The stage is set, the stakes are high, and for once, you're not the only one sweating. Across the arena, your executioner fidgets with his helmet. A stagehand resets a fake boulder that keeps rolling off its pedestal. A senator argues with a stage manager about whether the tragic finale should be more theatrical. And you, well, you're just waiting to die, ideally with a little dignity, but more realistically with all your limbs still attached. This was supposed to be simple. A public execution wrapped in mythological storytelling. One final humiliation, cloaked in drama. You were to play Ixion, the man who dared to lust after Juno, and was sentenced to an eternity strapped to a flaming spinning wheel. The props are ready. The fire is lit. The wheel squeaks ominously. And yet, somehow, everything starts going wrong. First, the actor playing Jupiter forgets his lines. Then the wheel won't spin. Then someone realizes the harness meant to secure you to the wheel is missing entirely. For several minutes, the crowd just sits there, watching as stagehands scramble with rope and slap at the flames licking too high. You're left standing awkwardly, hands half-bound, wondering if you should bow or stretch. Eventually, someone yells, "Just improvise," and the execution begins anyway. The wheel turns barely. The flames flicker. You spin once. Slowly. Awkwardly. It's less divine punishment, more disgraced children's birthday party. And then the miracle happens. The crowd laughs, not with cruelty but with amusement, real, genuine laughter. A few even clap. Someone yells, "Let him do another spin." And for a moment, the atmosphere changes. You're not a criminal anymore. You're part of the entertainment. Rome loved theater. It loved punishment. And when it could combine both, it was euphoric. But Rome also loved absurdity, and that's what you've become. A bumbling symbol of overproduced vengeance. The flaming wheel squeaks again, this time catching your tunic. You pat out the fire to cheers. The executioners hesitate. The senator who ordered this scene shrugs, as if to say, "Well, it's not going how I pictured it." The stage manager, now invested in your act, starts throwing in dramatic sound effects. One is just a guy hitting a bronze pot with a spoon. The audience is crying with laughter. And then you realize, the punishment has flipped. In a moment of pure Roman irony, the crowd has turned your sentence into satire. You weren't meant to survive. You weren't even meant to be remembered. But now you've become something far more powerful than a dead example. You're a meme. Historians still argue whether moments like this ever truly happened. Did an execution really flop so hard that the crowd saved the condemned? Were some criminals spared not by mercy but by comic timing? It sounds apocryphal. And yet, So does much of Rome. There are whispers in the stands, jokes about the wheel guy. Someone starts chanting your name. Children imitate your terrible spin. A vendor begins carving tiny wooden wheels to sell. You hear one guard mutter, "If we kill him now, it'll look bad." Another says, "Honestly, the wheel's broken anyway." You're helped down from the prop by two actors. One pats your back. "Nice improvisation," he whispers. You say nothing, mostly because you still haven't figured out if you're alive, dreaming, or part of a very elaborate dinner hallucination. The senator approaches, arms folded. He glares, then sighs. "Fine," he says. He lives. A huge cheer erupts. You almost fall over. You're escorted out not in chains, but in applause. Someone throws a garland at your feet. A woman offers you a date cake. You accept, still stunned. Somewhere behind you, the flaming wheel collapses with a spectacular crunch. Later, you sit at the edge of the arena, watching the next performance, a gladiator skit gone very wrong, involving a runaway goat. The crowd roars again. The empire spins on. You've survived. Not because you were innocent, not because you were pardoned, but because your punishment broke character and became comedy. And in Rome, that was sometimes enough. So now, you exhale. Let your jaw unclench, your shoulders fall, and your breath stretch long and slow. That's enough flaming wheels, pit prisons, and vinegar wine for one night. The worst has passed. You're no longer in the Colosseum, no longer listening for the hiss of a branding iron, no longer bracing for feathers or fire or farce. You're just here, in the quiet, with the cool air settling softly against your skin. Rome was magnificent, but it was also a masterpiece of contradiction. Elegant columns above, punishment pits below, public baths by day, public executions by lunch. And through it all, the empire kept its rhythm. You didn't need to be noble to be noticed. You just had to slip, say too much, love the wrong person, laugh at the wrong joke, or wear your toga a little too well. But here's the strange truth. The strangest punishments were never just about pain. They were about performance. Every sack of snakes, every scalding vinegar toast, every misspelled placard was Rome putting on a show. A show meant not to kill, but to remind. And you've made it through every act. Let your mind drift now. The crowds have dispersed. The torches are low. The city is hushed. Even the gods, stern as they were, have turned their gaze elsewhere for the night. Whatever part of you wandered into that ancient world, let it come home. Softly, slowly. You're safe. And in case no one's told you lately, you'd have been terrible in a flaming wheel anyway. Sleep well, friend. Sweet dreams.